Hello and welcome back to Monday Motivations with Vertical Renewal. As you know, we are doing a series on financial wellness. Last month, we spoke about financial wellness from a scriptural or spiritual perspective, starting in Genesis. And we had with us last month my brother-in-law, Johnny. He's back with us tonight. My brother, Alex, he's back with us tonight. And we want to do part two. We want to continue this conversation. And by the way, if you missed last month, go back. You don't want to miss what we discussed about financial wellness from a spiritual and scriptural perspective. And so we're glad you're with us tonight. Hello, Johnny. How are you tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. It's truly an honor to be here with you, Norman and Alex, tonight. I'm looking forward to having an in-depth conversation about stewardship.
Yes, sir.
It's a matter that's important to me, and we are the owners of nothing. God owns it all.
Absolutely. Alex, welcome back.
Well, it's good to be back here with Vertical Renewal and to continue the conversation this month. Last month we did touch a little bit on in our conversation about stewardship, so it's really good to continue that this week. So looking forward to hear from the expert.
Yes, so am I. As we talk about stewardship tonight, I do want to start with a scripture in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 through 30, where Jesus gives a parable about three people who were given talents. One was given 5, one was given 2, and then one was given 1. And the one got in the parable that was given 5 talents, he went, invested, and doubled it. The one who was given 2 talents, he went, invested, and doubled it. The one who was given 1 talent went and buried it, did nothing with it. And in the parable, the one that buried it and did nothing with it was judged because of it. And what he had was taken from him and given to somebody else who did with theirs. And I open with that because I do believe that sets forth a principle that when we have finances or gifts and talents of any kind, we are accountable and we are held responsible to use it wisely and to grow it so it can be more beneficial than just, what was given.
That's right. And to me, with that talent, what speaks to my heart is that God gives a seed first before he gives a harvest, right?
That's true.
They were given equally, a seed. But what did you do with that seed? All right. So one hit it, and the others multiplied it, right? So sometimes in life, people are like, well, if I had this, if I had 1 million, if I had 10 million, what about the 1,000 you have? What about the 10,000? What about the 100,000, right?
Yeah.
That's a seed.
Yeah,
Yes,
correct.
yes,
Because
yes.
what's interesting is one was given 5, one was given 2, but the one that was given 5 and the one that was given 2 did the same thing.
Correct.
They maximized what they had.
Absolutely.
And they grew what they had.
Correct.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and to your point that we often hear that the journey of 1,000 miles begin with the first step. And I think the same thing when we talk about stewarding finances is how we take a dollar. You hear about penny stocks and so. But how do you take the small is the point in how it can grow when it is cultivated, when it's nurtured, just like the seed, the plant, as
That's
you
right.
referenced the harvest. It has to start, and sometimes we don't think that we have. I've heard in conversations. I think depending on the environment, you think you don't have enough, right? But I think whatever one has is the starting place to the journey to where you ultimately would like to go, and that's the encouraging part. Doesn't matter where you are. It's that you have the mindset and understand the model of stewardship that you start in that space and then grow from there.
Right. Because when you look at it from a stewardship perspective, you have to ask yourself this question, right? Who owns it, right? We know that God owns it all, right? God gives increase. But when you buy a house, right, or when you purchase a car, or, when you buy, an asset, are you really the owner, right?
Mhm.
Think about it. If you own a house, right, you took out a deed, right? If you don't pay your mortgage, you miss a payment or 2 payments, 3 payments, what's going to happen?
Right.
That
Right.
property doesn't belong to you. Look at the
Exactly.
deed. It's the bank,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Or if you miss your tax payment and your mortgage was paid off, they can still repossess the land, right?
Correct.
So you have to look at it as how could I be get the best use of what God's given me in terms of the talent, the time, as well as the treasure, so I can optimize my results, right? As
Mhm.
a steward, because we're all caretakers of what God give us,
Right.
right? So as we look at it from, what, I don't own anything. You know what? God owns it. How could I be a better money manager? The resources, right?
Right.
Am I looking inwardly or I'm looking outwardly? If I'm looking inwardly, is my focus is on myself,
Right.
I, right? Am I looking to get the best results possible for me? Or I'm looking outwardly, right? How can I help others? How can I make a kingdom impact?
Right.
Am I looking at my balance sheet like, you know what? I got this, I got that, the other. I'm trying to accumulate assets and build wealth and have a storehouse. I'm looking at my balance sheet as, you know what? Building memories, moments, right? Having a
Right.
legacy
Right.
and making an impact in the kingdom. And when the person that I'm blessing is joyful and happy, guess what? That gives me a gratitude and realizing I'm doing God's work.
Right.
Right.
Right. So, what's the value of money? What do you want it to do for you? Right.
Right.
And those are the questions, in my opinion, that one should ask themselves. And then you're doing it with a plan and purpose and with good intentions. And then you'll have better results and a better outcome over time.
For sure.
Absolutely. And I think it has a lot to do with um, how we value what we have.
Yeah.
Do we take a nonchalant position about it? Do we take a um, irresponsible position about it? Or do we value it to the extent that we realize that, I'm blessed. This is a blessing.
Sure.
And how can I maximize my blessing? How can I show appreciation
Mhm.
for what I have? When you appreciate, you maximize. When you appreciate time, you maximize
That's
the
right.
use of
Right.
it.
That's right.
And or do I just take what I have nonchalantly and do nothing with it? Like in the parable, the one that had the one talent just buried it, probably forgot about it,
Mhm.
didn't value what it was and what could become of it.
Right.
And right here is a good place to let somebody know that whatever you have is a blessing, and it can be not only a blessing to you, but be a blessing to others. Because if we learn to value what we have, then we recognize what can become from what we have.
That's right.
Some people have suffered from low self-esteem and devalue themselves, devalue time, devalue money. But when you have a better perspective and value for who you are and for what you have, there is an incentive to steward it in a more effective and appropriate way.
Right. Right.
And when you take on the ownership of stewardship, right, and you put on have a kingdom mindset, then you're trusting in God to have a divine purpose for your giving.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, is that when God gives the wisdom, He's going to give you the opportunity, right?
That's true.
And you'll be able to see the opportunity and seize the moment. Because if you look at a coin, right, and if what wealth and risk was on the same side of the coin, we all be wealthy, right?
Right.
Right. Right.
But you have to take some type of risk to get a reward, right?
Right.
So just as you said with the parable of talents, the one who hit it didn't want to take the risk. So he gave the master back, returned exactly what he gave him.
Right.
Instead of taking it to the bankers, instead of looking for an opportunity for it to increase.
Right.
So you're gonna look at the glass half full, or you look at it as half empty. If we're in a recession, you're like, oh no, I got to keep my money in the pocket, or you're gonna be like, great, where's the opportunity where I can capitalize, where I
Right.
can make a kingdom impact.
Right.
So if you have the mindset where you know what, I own nothing, I have nothing to lose, there's no downside because God owns everything, right?
Mhm.
Then yeah, God can use you, right?
Right.
Because it's about the heart. And then God will give you the wisdom and you'll be able to see the opportunity, but you see from a different perspective, right? We see it from, maybe a 1,000-foot lens or a 30,000-foot lens, but he sees it from an eternal perspective,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that's where having a kingdom mindset would change, in terms of having a paradigm shift, the way you see things, the way you see people, and where you can operate in terms of
Right.
the character and the conversation. that's going to be meaningful over your lifetime.
Yeah, one of the things I was going to say to a few statements that were made earlier, I think when we think about stewardship also, and what you're saying, Johnny, in the passage that was read earlier, the one that they were working it, they were cultivating it, and I think about positioning, right?
Yes.
So as a steward, we find out what is the best position. If I have a seed, I'm going to find like what's the best positioning. And depending on what the amount is, that's where you is it. I love to grow plants and take care of them as well. And so depending on the kind of plant it is, right, what kind of sunlight it needs, how much water it needs.
Yes.
So depending on, where you're investing, what kind of return I'm expected from the plant, the same with finance and the same with my health and everything. I go again, what we said last month, we talk about the holistic approach to stewardship,
Right.
because that when we become, I would like to say, practitioners of stewardship, I think that we start to make it part of everything, and it will yield that in such space where we're living in this place of peace, of harmony, because it does flows together. It flows into the money. It flows into
Yes.
how we think. It flows into how we eat and how we
Right.
exercise. And I think a lot of time, is particularly in the religious community, a lot of people latched on to, the tithe and then the giving and the money and stuff like that, only from the money perspective, where I think it's very important for us to amplify the importance of the holistic approach, because that will give us, I think, and that will yield in and of itself, because that is a system that's in place, the happiness and the joy that we have, and making sure that we're positioning ourselves, that we working it like the ones that saw the return. They didn't just sit it there, right? Because you can have something and put it somewhere. If you're not working it, it's not working for you.
Right.
And so that's what I think that's part of the idea of stewarding something at the highest level that we have capacity to
That's
do.
right. And when you're a steward, you're looking at, your talent, your resources, your time from a different lens, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that lens is looking at it from, time is a tool, it's not an enemy.
Right.
Because, patience is a virtue, it's an asset,
Right.
right? Because you're utilizing time to be advantageous, be opportunistic, right? You're not going to fall into the false belief systems that exist in terms of get rich quick, right?
Right. Right.
Or, it only goes up. You got to get it now. You got to
Right.
buy now, or you're going to lose out there the opportunity,
Exactly.
right? And when you do that, then you become also what I'm looking for. You become a slave to the economic system, right? But when you fall under God's system, then you utilize stewardship, right? Patience, diversification, being systematic, being intentional, right? Being a plan and purpose for everything that you're doing, knowing that, God owns it all and God will provide the increase.
Right.
And that's important to understand. And once you implement that, philosophy in life and those principles, the sowing and reaping, then at the end of the day, God's going to do his work, right? And you'll see the fruits of that.
Right. It reminds me of if you're faithful over a few things, God will make you rule over many. Sometimes we complain about what we have when we don't have what we want. But the reality is, if Alex made reference to earlier, if we work what we got, that will increase what we have. But one of the things that I think is very important to note, and you kind of suggested this in your comment, Johnny, it takes discipline.
Yes.
We got to be disciplined to work what we have the right way. Stewardship requires discipline. Stewardship requires patience. And you also kind of talked about that a little bit, Johnny, because things don't happen overnight.
Yes.
And when they don't happen overnight, that doesn't mean that they're not going to happen.
Right.
You gotta be disciplined enough to have the patience to work through it. I remember, Alex, when you birthed the idea of an arts conservatory for teens.
Right.
What you did was took the talent God gave you and multiplied it, and it didn't happen overnight. The stewardship of that talent that has multiplied, now blessing hundreds of children and across the bay, came because you got up early in the mornings, you came in late at night, you really worked what you had, and you put the discipline in. Of course, you could talk more about it than I can. I'm
Yeah.
just talking from an observer's perspective.
Yeah.
But yeah, you
And that's true. That's what goes back to what we were talking about the holistic approach. Because I think even with the organization or what we've done with the music businesses as well, is to your point, it doesn't happen overnight, and it's a lot for me. Um, my faith is prayer and meditation and getting up early. And people ask me, "What? How are you inspired in what you do?" And that was that taking a little bit of $800 and 30 students and growing $800 and growing the organization into a seven-figure organization, and also 30 students into over 14,000 students. But it took, and I was having this conversation with someone the other day. I was saying that was me taking an old briefcase, used briefcase, and walking around with a jacket from the Goodwill store and dressing it up. And what I did, I wanted to ensure that I invested and position the seed that I was entrusted with, the vision to bring forth. And that happens with everything, with the finance and with, your peace of mind, your state of being, your health, and all that. And that turns into a wealth
That's right.
many different pockets or many different buckets: wealth of knowledge, wealth of wisdom, wealth of finance.
Right.
And it's a journey. It's not a sprint. It's definitely a journey that we should enjoy every experience on the journey of storage. When we're stewarding something, the sun sets, the sun rises, the rain, the storms, the snowstorms, the tornadoes. All of that is part of our human experience. And I think last month we talked about, we started in the Hebrew Bible, the scripture talking about Cain and Abel and those different experiences, and not only limiting.
Yes.
But if Cain and had seen a little bit broader idea of what he was entrusted with, I think his experience would have been a lot more than he was experiencing. Then that would have negated him from getting upset or jealous with his own brother because of his the offerings that he were able to give and the way they were received. So
Right.
I think the same thing today. We will not have to feel some kind of way or become frustrated or feel some kind of jealousy or look at somebody else's home or car or their well-being and become envious of it when we realize the seeds, what we have, and how if we cultivate and position it properly, then it will give and it will yield that wealth to us and into well-beings. And so that's a lot and that's what we did with the Arts Conservatory, and we're teaching the students that. So that was a long way of saying it.
Yeah, one of the things that as we talk that keeps coming to mind is our lives, the aspects are different aspects of our lives are not disconnected. They're intertwined. So when we're talking about financial wellness, we're not just talking about money.
Right.
Yes.
We're talking about principles of how you invest your time and your talent, because time and talent, gifts, all of that tie into financial wellness because
Yes.
our lives are intertwined. I mean, aspects of our lives
Yes.
are intertwined. They're not disconnected. If we talk about the discipline with how to spend a dollar, well, that discipline applies to how we utilize our time.
Right.
How do we utilize other resources, and all of it comes back and plays into financial wealth.
Yeah.
Correct.
Or financial wellness.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. You show me somebody that is financially disciplined and how to save and how to put their money. Then I'll tell that same person that, there's a discipline in how we exercise, how we discipline ourselves to say, I'm going to be intentional about being respectful or honoring or loving and so on and so forth. So that's the holistic approach that I think the principle that we learn from in one aspect. And then some people are very good at, how to show gratitude but then they tend to separate that same discipline into the financial. So I think we live in we've internalized these silos or compartmentalized in areas that we should not be. We are one human being, and all of this is a part of us, and this is part of our system. It's like, how do we awaken that, and how do we stir that up? And so that's what we've been spending a lot of time doing, even with my organization, is trying to awaken that part of the human existence.
Absolutely.
Right.
And then when I consult people on financial wealth management, right, so they can be better stewards of the talent, time, and treasure that God give them. What I've come to learn, over my many years in industry is that for most people, going back to what you said, if you have that dollar, right, the dollar that they earn, where is it going immediately, right? It's going to support a lifestyle, right?
Right.
And then from there, then it's all right. I got to pay my taxes. That's why Uncle Sam takes us from the top, right? And then I got to repay my debt.
Yes.
And then after that, you know what? You're in a deficit, right?
Right.
So you have no surplus,
Right.
right? So then in order to pay your debt, you absorb more debt, right? So that becomes a stronghold. So you have less money to give, less money to save, less money to invest, and less money to make an impact on the kingdom, right? But when you make the paradigm shift and you understand stewardship, right, and you want to implement a processes, and be disciplined, right, and you're going to be systematic in what you do, the first thing you do with income increase is what? You give, you tithe, right?
Right.
And then from there, you pay your taxes, as the Lord said, and then you pay your debt. But now you have more spendable annual income after that. And that income would be, all right, great. Now I can spend on myself and enjoy the fruits of my labor, but I prioritize how I utilize the resources. Now, when the harvest comes, I'm prepared to receive that harvest, right?
Right.
Because I don't have any debt that becomes a hindrance for me making a kingdom impact.
Right.
But if you consume with debt, how can the Lord give you more money, more resources,
Right.
to bless? Because your obligation is to the lender,
Right.
right? But we need to free ourselves of liability, debt management, so we have a greater positive cash flow, so we can make an impact on giving and being good stewards of our time, talent, and resources.
Yeah, and self-absorbed living leads to bad stewardship
Yes.
and leads to bad accumulation of debt,
Right.
which kind of makes us a slave to debt. And we can't do what we need to do and live freely as God intends for us to live. And one thing we talked about last month was this whole tithing system under the Mosaic law that serves as a model and sets forth principles with respect to a financial system. So I make reference to that to say this as it relates to stewardship. To be good stewards and to be faithful stewards is to implement a system which includes God. And when we talk about God, another thing we talked about last month is, giving to God is giving to others, whether it's ministries or non-for-profit organization with purpose, because that systematic financial model under the Mosaic law was basically three: one for the Levi, one for festivals, and one tithing was for giving to the community, the poor and the far. So when we put a system in place as faithful stewards, we can't be self-absorbed, because being self-absorbed or being selfish is doing just like the person in the parable that took his one talent and buried it. This is mine. Let's keep it safe. Let's keep it buried. But the other two, the ones that had 5 and the one that had 2, they didn't do that. And it was doubled. So when we put a system in place and become faithful and disciplined stewards, what it does, provides for opportunity to grow, to expand, to double, quadruple. But that selfishness, it's like signing your financial death certificate, or the death certificate to a happy and free life.
Right. And think about when you operate under the God's umbrella, right? The God's system and provisions that He has in place for us. Think about what you achieve: peace of mind, right? You have joy, contentment, happiness, and you're giving with a purpose, right? You're making a difference in your life. And that stuff, all the money in the world cannot buy you that, right?
Right.
And that has, internal impact, right? So it starts from inside and it reflects and manifests on the outside.
Right.
And that's huge. That's enormous.
Right.
Right.
Right. That's very, very true.
I'm thinking, what if, what if the guy in the parable that had the only one talent, what if he looked at what was given to the other two, and because he didn't get what they got, he cared less about being responsible about what he had. If that's the attitude he took, he set himself up to get the one that he had taken from him. And I'm bringing that up to say, when you are good stewards, you don't compare yourself against what other people have.
That's right.
Compare yourself with other people. And you don't base your value or your worth based on what other people have. You look at what you're blessed with.
Correct.
And you work what you have, and you will begin to see how what you have can grow and grow, because when it grows to the next level, you do the same thing at the next level, then it's going to grow from that.
Right.
And that is certainly a part of what I believe faithful stewardship, good stewardship is all about.
Right.
Yeah. And my old mentor told me, he said, listen, money flows where it's treated well.
I like that.
So think about it.
I like that.
If the steward had the one talent and he did nothing with it, God's not flowing resources to that individual, right? Because he did nothing, right?
Yeah.
It goes where it's treated well. So the 5 and the 2 that multiplied it, guess what? He took from the 1, and that's where it was allocated, to the 5.
Right.
So, think about that. Again, as you said, be content. Don't look to the person to your left or to your right. We all have different talents. We have different capacity limits. We have different temperaments. We all bring strengths to the table that's uniquely created just for us, because God knows what's best and what His will is for each individual. Focus on what you can do best and optimize those results where you can achieve, greatness, during your time here on earth.
Right. That's true. I think it's about really embracing and celebrating and treating it well, and learn that it grows. It goes back to the plant that I was referenced earlier, because it's dealing with the seed, and the ones that there were 3 plants, and they tell the story of the monks. You may have heard the one, and the monk would speak to in affirmative words to the plant, and it grew and grew, and then the one that was that didn't get the attention kind of just died. So we have to be intentional. We have to work it in order to get the full potential. But even the different plants, right? Each calls for different attention.
Yes.
And so that goes back to what Norman said. Everyone has a different talent and whatever, but each can grow into whatever that fullest potential is just as a plant. And that's how we have to engage our own understanding who we are, what we have, and how we want to grow it, not looking at someone else, because we could look at someone else and that could be very limiting in so many different ways, because we could surpass what we're seeing and comparing to someone else. Or it may not, whatever our potential, it is our capacity, and we work that, and wherever and whatever we have, we start there and grow from.
Right.
Right. Because remember, we all laborers together, right?
Yes.
Right.
So understanding that, right, we can complement each other. And it's like the old saying in the Ecclesiastics, right? 1 could conquer 1,000, 2 could conquer what?
Right. 10,000.
But we work together,
Right.
and we find out how we complement each other, not compete, but ultimately, have a vision and a goal in mind where we can make a difference and impact.
Right. Not compete.
That's right.
But complement.
Yeah.
And not look at each other and be, envious, but be inspired.
Yes.
That's right.
And we can kind of like brothers and sisters, just grow together. This is really, every time it starts to get really, really good, it's time to close out. But certainly this has been wonderful. Last month, we talked about financial wellness. This month, tonight, we talking about financial wellness. But we're going to do part 3 next month. And we're going to continue this conversation as we talk more from a scientific, from the perspective of the science of giving. And I know, Johnny, you being a financier, you can weigh in heavily on that, dealing with ways you can invest and things of that nature. I don't even want to start trying to, because I know I'll mess it up. But I want to encourage our listeners to please join in again next month. We're going to do part 3 to financial wellness. You don't want to miss it. And I said this in the very beginning tonight. If you missed the one from last month, go back and look at that. Some great nuggets of truth, wisdom were deposited, and I believe it will bless your life. You can learn more about us on our website, www.verticalrenewal.com. We encourage you to sow seeds. Talking about financial wellness, we encourage you to sow seeds in this good ground, Vertical Renewal. There are a number of ways you can do that. You can cash out at $ Vertical Renewal. You can send money via Venmo with the @ Vertical-Renewal. And you can Zelle. The number associated with our Zelle is 813-734-4882. Johnny and Alex, it's been wonderful. I look forward to you guys sharing with us next month. Tune in the second Monday in June at 8 o'clock. See you there.